What is up, everybody? My name is Richard Terrell. I go by Kirby Kid, and you are watching the fifth part. Are we on five? The fifth part of our Footsies fighting game FunDOmentals video series. This is a video series where we are deep diving into what fighting games are, why people enjoy them, from a game design perspective, from a competitor's perspective, and really putting every single mystery on the table, solving every problem, understanding how everything works, and putting it all in one video series so you will never have any questions ever again. Because really, it's been a long time. Fighting games are pretty popular now, and there's so many questions out there about how to improve, what's the real part of the game, what's really special about fighting games, and so on and so forth. So we've come a long way. The series, many hours of playing, many hours of research. We've created this strategy spread for a game called Footsies. Footsies is an incredibly simplified and stripped down version of a fighting game, yet we had all these fun things to say about it. But now we are on a particular segment of this series in which we are taking quotes from other fighting game players. Good players, probably the best players, maybe some not so best players, but really we're putting everything that they say into perspective. And I have like a little concept map here, and every time they say something, we put their quote somewhere on the map. We've got a lot more quotes to go through. We've been through a lot of quotes. As you can see, each one of these blue thingies is a quote by a particular person talking about a particular thing. So some of the information down here is going to pertain to learning in neurology, and some of it's going to pertain to mindset and learning practices, but a lot of it has to do with what we uncovered on how fighting games work. So this concept of a strategy spread, and what does it mean to have strategy, this concept of adaptation, this concept of footsies, or sort of the bleeding edge of the fighting game core. I probably should move this double blind core over here. Let me see about that. I'm gonna move this double blind core over here. And that's what's great about this. And you just move it if it doesn't make sense. Boop. But it's less about matchups and stuff and more about footsies and reads. So we're just gonna do this. Put this out here. And really, we're just gonna move these three over here. And good. Now it's all balanced. Cool. So we're going to go through more quotes. You know the drill by now. I'm going to play it, we're going to listen to it, and we're going to talk about it, break it down, understand how it fits into the big picture. So let's go. Let's start with quote number 52.
Like, to be honest, dude, it will be impossible for me to tell you how to fix those things that you're talking about. That's like nearly impossible. When I was a kid, when I was 13, 14, I used to lose a lot of games just because, like, I don't know, someone camped me, or like, just because, like, someone decided to actually beat me, right?
God.
It's funny. So, yeah, dude, don't get desperate about it.
So yeah, that definitely happens to me sometimes. Like, I get a bit salty, and it kind of makes me worse at the game. Unlike when
But again, it's like, it's because you're young. Like, again, I don't really like saying that, because I think the fact that, like, some people say, hey, it's because you're a kid. Sometimes there's, like, over-exaggerating, right? But when you're playing Smash, it is, like, really easy to do that, because, again, like, I used to get mad at the game as well. I used to be mad. I used to be salty. And now, like, if I lose, I'm just like, alright.
I can't.
It's like, whatever, right? Like, I can try next time. But, like, yeah.
But yeah, for, like, Smash...
Cool. So kid's talking about how he gets a better mentality about the game. Like, when he rage quits or when he gets mad and stuff, he's like, how do I get this out of my system? And MK Leo is young. He's 20 years old. This kid is even younger. He's 13, I think. Maybe younger. But they all started when they were young. But MK Leo's saying, yeah, some things are because you are a kid. You literally don't have enough life experience. You rage because you don't know, and you're young, and your emotions are crazy, but as you get older, you mature, so that's not something that you want to sit down and try to lab out how to not get angry. Just be yourself, Try to be honest, have fun with the game, and then grow up. Essentially, grow up over time. So that's some really good advice about, and very insightful advice about mindset. A lot of people are looking at aspects of the Smash game and kind of abstracting these high level concepts off of it. Like, ooh, how do I get a good mindset? How do I be patient? How do I, uh, have this kind of mental fortitude? When really, the core of what's happening in the fighting game is, as we described, what's happening with the strategy spread. And the strategy spread is created by how you learn and approach the game. And how you learn and approach the game is largely a product of taking your curiosity, going hands-on with the game and perceiving it, getting experience, having thoughts and observations about what you did, and then processing those into heuristics, methods, strategies, whatever. And like that cycle repeats over and over. Everything else is a lot of the sort of side effects and quirks brought by just being human and being a complex machine. So sometimes you can't look at Smash and be like, oh, how do I remove this like hand shaky thing when I get nervous? Like, you're a person who gets nervous. You can iron that out over time. You can do breathing exercises and stuff, but not everything can be labbed out. You're a person. You have to take a lot of who you are with you and just understand that it's part of the whole process and also part of why we like this game, right? It affects us in a lot of ways. We engage a lot of ourselves with it, not just our fingers, not just our minds, but so many other aspects. So, cool. Threw that into the mix. Next quote, 53.
Luigi's a way easier character to play, and it gives you more. Like, it's better when it comes to being rewarded by like doing not many things. With Bowser Jr., you're gonna have like a way better neutral, and that's kind of hard. You have it, like you're good. But like when you're playing against a Luigi player, no matter if you're good at neutral, the thing is that like if you get grabbed, you're pretty much dead. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
If the Luigi's good, like he doesn't even have to have good neutral. If he knows how to combo, it's like he's dead.
Oh, nice. GG,
Like-
GG.
Like I don't know how to explain it. Like it might look like I'm just talking like trash about Luigi mains. I think there are really good ones. But to be honest, their playstyle is not really the best when it comes to being a good player. And in reality, I think Luigi's a really good character, but it's kind of like Game & Watch, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you don't gotta be a good player in order to, like, be good with that character, or, like, do a lot of damage to other characters, like, with matches and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Also, another notable win that I...
So, he's talking about, kid asks, should I play Bowser Jr., should I play Luigi? And he's like, Luigi's a lot easier to get wins. I mean, he does tons of damage, he has these 0 to death combos. You can play to your grab and do really well, and this kid's really good. But he also said, like, Bowser Jr. is going to help you develop a better neutral. He's going to make you think about the game a little bit more. It's going to be harder, but you're going to develop a different set of skills. So, there's some subtle things MK Leo is saying here in this quote, but basically, some characters teach you more about, have more transferable skills or teach you more about the core of the game than others. So let's take a listen again.
But, like, when you're playing against a Luigi player, no matter if you're good at neutral, the thing is that, like, if you get grabbed, you're pretty much dead. You know what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
If the Luigi's good, like, he doesn't even have to have good neutral. If he knows how to combo, it's like he's dead.
Oh, nice.
So there's an aspect where this so in the neutral, you could say a lot is involved somewhat in Footsies, not necessarily, but somewhat. And the adaptation, the strategy limits, slight variation, counter strats, branches, risk rewards, slight variation, fringe, mix-ups. He's really talking about... I don't think we have an exact label for this, but it was hard to display this with Footsies because Footsies doesn't have matchups and it doesn't have a bunch of different types of attacks that you see in fighting games like projectiles and things. So he's saying not every character lets you play the game evenly. Not every character lets you develop skills around Footsies or a lot of counterplay even necessarily. So like characters can influence what you think about the game on a base level. So I'm just going to chalk that up to It's under. I'm gonna put a thingy here, and it says like vast possibilities explored unevenly, something like that. It's just like there's so many possibilities. There's core stuff, and then there's not core stuff. I'm just gonna shrink this because this concept's not super important, and I'm just gonna put this a little bit here and a little bit in between these two.
GG.
Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it might look like I'm just talking like trash about Luigi mains. I think there are really good ones. But to be honest, their playstyle is not really the best when it comes to being a good player.
Yeah, so their playstyle is not the best when it comes to being a good player, as in developing good core skills. And when you're talking about like the strategy spread, let's say that you are really good at Demon and Footsies, and you practice all the stuff, and you know all these techniques, and you know all these nuances, and you know all this stuff, and you know all this stuff. Well, like, Demon is just one move out of Mini and Footsies. When you use it, you only get one per set. One per best out of 5 set. So even if you're like the best ever at this thingy, it's not really teaching you how to be good at all this stuff, right? That's what he's saying. Now, specializing in Demon and Footsies is obviously not a good idea for exactly what I just said, but other fighting games have more complexity, more branches, more moves, more characters, and you could certainly just kind of like park yourself in one part of the whole spread and dive deep as you want. So when Leo's saying here, yeah, like, there's certain things that Luigi does, it doesn't help you learn more of the well-rounded strategy space. That's exactly what he's saying here. Some characters are so wacky, so different with their strategy and their approach to the game that you are not learning core neutral stuff and you're not learning core footsie stuff. So I'm going to put that also under here, because it does have a little bit to do with footsies, as in you're not learning it. Cool.
And in reality, I think Luigi's a really good character, but it's kind of like Game & Watch, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you don't gotta be a good player in order to, like, be good with that character, or, like, do a lot of damage to other characters, like, with matches and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so finally, we're out of Smash. We are out of Smash quotes, and we're going to head a little bit into Street Fighter. We're going to take a listen to one of my favorite players in Street Fighter and fighting game players of all time. His name's Daigo Umehara, and he is incredibly wise. He's old. He's older than all of us, right? All me. I'm 34, and he's in his 40s. He wrote a book on fighting games. He won multiple EVOs. He is the author of the Evo Moment 37, is it? Let's take a look. Evo Moment 37 with the famous parry, which we will just zoom to again. Yep. Yep, that thing.
Now on the verge of putting Daigo down, 1-0.
Yep, that moment that got so many people deep into fighting games, never to be seen again. Okay, so we're gonna listen to a little bit of Daigo Umehara. Here's a clip here, and we can just let it rock. So I'll probably have to read it to you. Let me see. Volume down. There are also situations where you have a pretty nice frame advantage, but you are actually traps. This is too loud. Volume down. That are actually traps, like Guile's upside down kick or Ibuki's V-skill Tinray, which still punishes you if you move. They lack knowledge when you can throw a move and when you shouldn't. But only strong players use sequences like that to trick you. In low ranks, it's good enough for you as long as you have an anti-air and execute combos. Those players can't tell quickly whether they have an advantage or not in a given situation. Low-level players can't tell even if they have a good thing going. But I'm the same in matchups I'm not used to. I love that. Sometimes I'm like, wait, can I make a move now in this situation? In short, it's your knowledge. Cool. So this is, I mean, Daigo, MKLeo is really incredibly insightful, especially for being so young. Daigo's played many more fighting games than MKLeo has. He was like one of the best in Street Fighter 2, one of the best in Street Fighter Third Strike, which you just saw, one of the best in Street Fighter 4, he's one of the best in Street Fighter 5. He's also played other fighting games that I don't even know about, right? And he's been doing it for so long. So this guy literally wrote the book, or a book, on fighting games and how to develop your mentality and what does it mean to be a competitor. He's kind of like how David Sterlin for the West wrote Playing to Win and how that really inspired a lot of people to play fighting games better. But this is Daigo. This is the progenitor. So let's go over this quote. There are plenty of situations where you have a nice frame advantage on you, but are actually a trap. So he's talking about real nuanced situations, like Guile's upside down kick or Ibuki's V skill, which punches you in the movement. So like, he didn't mention frame advantage specifically, so we're gonna put this somewhere in between. Let's say Daigo, and I'm really bad at spelling Daigo. You'd think, after meeting the guy and talking about him for years, but I'm bad at spelling in general, so. Okay, so he's talking about mechanics, specific moves in the game that have these properties, so we're going to put it over here, go back over here, blah blah blah. When you move your plus due to your hurt box, they lack knowledge and you can throw a move when you shouldn't. Guys, remember, all the D card scales to 5, but 4 displayed here, that you can have dexterity, reflex, timing, knowledge. Knowledge is the biggest deal for games because knowledge is where this basically feeds everything else. Your understanding and execution of timing is your ability to conceptualize the timings and remember them, so that's part of your knowledge. Your techniques that you need to do to pull off dexterous movements, a lot of that's knowledge. How you hold your hand, what you do with your fingers, and even how you tune your brain to have sharper reflexes all feeds back on knowledge. And knowledge also includes things like core rules, basic commands, advanced inputs, metagame stuff, frame data stuff, in-match decision making, for your working memory, your analyze skills. You have heuristical knowledge and logarithmic knowledge, flow charts and things like that. So knowledge is the biggest deal, right? Like, animals can do reflexes, animals can do timing, animals can do dexterity, but the animals can't really do knowledge like we do. So we have to leverage the thing that we are really uniquely good at. So when we say knowledge, when we talk about strategy, this is really getting to the core of what makes humans unique and what makes the world deep to us, because we can understand it. So they lack knowledge when it comes to when to throw a move when you can't. So he's talking about weaker players. But only strong players use a sequence like that to trick you. So he's talking about, like, there's certain moves where it has branches of possibilities, and strong players are the only ones who create mix-ups to trick people. Like that. That's what makes them strong. They have this like little flow chart. They're like, ha ha ha, I'll do this, I'll do that. Like, we talked a little bit about that before. He's saying without the knowledge of the strategy spread and the branches, it's hard to know when you can go, when you can't go. It's hard to evaluate the risk reward. Okay. And low ranks is good enough for you as long as you can anti-air and execute combo. So like low level players can just get around the basics. Those players can't tell whether they have an advantage in a given situation. Cool. They can't tell the risk reward. But I love this. But I'm the same in matchups I'm not used to. Cool. So, being one of the best players in the world for over 20 years or whatever, you think he just touches fighting games and he automatically knows what to do and he automatically knows what's happening. He's like, no. He's just as bad, just as clueless, just as lacking knowledge as beginning players, low-level players, when he doesn't know the matchup, right? There's only two things. You either know, you got the knowledge, you've experienced it, you have the the interactions worked out. You have the strategy spread kind of figured out. You know the risk rewards or what they can end in. You either know it or you don't. And that same feeling that low level players have and non-fighting game players, like beginning players and just clueless players have when they're like, "What's happening?" And they mash buttons. It's the same exact feeling that the best players in the world have when they don't know what's going on. You can't just know what's going on. You can have an idea, you can make an educated guess, sure, but at the end of the day, when somebody's creating a trap on you based on weird timings and frame advantages, you can't know that. You can't figure that out on the fly. You have to know it ahead of time. So I love it how he's saying strategy is the difference maker, and if you have it, you're like me. If you don't, you're like everybody else. And if he has it, he's like if he doesn't have it, he's also like everybody else.
そうなっちゃう。この場面手出していいのかなって。まあ知識だよね、早い話が。それ。
Cool. Great quote. Great quote. Great quote. Cool. Okay, next.
例えばさ、ザンゲームがさ、
76.
振りがマックスの時
Even platinum players know you can't throw projectiles against Zangief when he's in full V gauge, right? So he's talking about different levels of players. This is pretty easy to understand.
でもなんだろう。
But think about more minute things. But let's take a situation after you block Guile's standing hard punch. So, think about more minute things. Standing hard punch. Where did I put that Daigo quote? We're on 54. No, we're on 55. The previous one was 54. Okay. Maybe this isn't easy to understand. So he's saying, like, everybody's got some basic heuristical knowledge, right? Like, ooh, don't throw fireballs. Yeah. But he's like, you got to be a little bit more nuanced with it. You got to be more precise. So that lines up with this statement we made over here about how fighting games depth is about increasingly situation nuance and precise optimizations, right? So he's like, you got to look a little harder. Like, look a little bit more about the situation than having this generic heuristic on your game plan. How about Guile's hard kick? Nah, that's not quite it. How do I put this? He's trying to find a move to explain what he's talking about while he's fighting a guy online. In the highest rank. I threw a back hard punch, right? I threw Sobat first, right? And Zangief threw his crouching light punch, blocking it, and this is a textbook move for Zangief. So he did something and Zangief responded in a very predictable way. Now after the crouching light punch, lots of Zangief players tend to throw standing hard punch. I know that from my experience. That's why I countered it with back hard punch. It's like that. So he's talking a little bit here about the meta game and counter strats. So we're gonna put this over here. A little bit about the meta game because he's talking about his experience of what most Zangief players do. Character playstyle, so anti-Zangief right there. Cool. To 736.
これね、ショーパン大パンってくる。でも本当は連携ってバランスで負けちゃうからあんまりやっちゃいけない。
Okay, so I'll back up. You see, he does a crouching light punch, standing hard punch, right? But I can punish that with back hard punch. So Geef isn't supposed to do that too often. Crouching light punch, staying hard punch, then my back kick, back hard punch, and there are minute situational mistakes like this. If you learn to punish stuff like this, your win rate will increase. Cool. So he's talking about on if you know the spread, some moves are just better than others, and some situations are much more risky. If you don't, you're just gonna keep doing the same thing over and over. And if you learn that, if you know that other people are gonna do it over and over, you can beat them just by having the counter strat. So he's saying learn the counter strats again, which we already have one down here, and your win rate will increase. So let's do this.
増やしていくと勝率がアップする。でもそれも俺も慣れてる組み合わせしかわかんない。
And even if I know how to do stuff like that for the matchup, I play against Geef a lot. So he knows stuff like this because of experiences that he gains, practice or whatever. Put that over there.
逆にでもそのショーパンの
But if my opponent learns that I tend to throw blocking hard punch after his crouching, then he can go for another option to punish that. So it's talking about the counter play or whatever. So I'm just saying this works in general.
こうな感じでやってる。
Cool. Cool. Moving on. Quote 56. When I watch amateurs play it, I can't tell what concept their gameplay is, and I can't tell what they're trying to achieve. That's why they can't win consistently in tournaments, and they're more likely to break down mentally. But for me, I know the key points to get my goal, so whatever happens along the way, I won't be mentally shaken, because I've already decided how I'm going to fight. So having strategies for you leads to your consistency, and it widens your play styles too. What I described is not the only correct strategy. People will come up with more and better strategies. But if your strategy isn't better than your opponent's, then you can never beat them, regardless of your player skill. It doesn't matter how good your reflexes are or how strong your mentality. You can't beat your opponent if he has a better strategy than you. In Street Fighter 5, your strategy is very important since the game itself is pretty simple. So I hope you think about that. Cool. So, some takeaways. I'll add one here. Fighting games are really simple. Fighting games are one of the simplest and most accessible genres. It's strategy that's hard, and it will always be hard, no matter what. And fighting games, you know, allow you to start creating strategies and having those strategies make a difference instantly, and that's why a lot of people quickly get in over their head. Let's see. So this is 56. This is 56. This is this is 56. Okay, so you watch amateurs play, he can't tell what strategies they have, so weak players don't have strategies, they don't think. So I'm going to put this under 56. I can't tell what the concept of the gameplay is because they don't have a concept, and I can't tell what they're trying to achieve. That's why they can't win consistently in tournaments, and they're more likely to break down mentally. So I thought that was interesting how their mindset is tied to their strategy, how like what they come to the table knowing. And we can put this just in general as like strategy spread. People not, if you don't have one, you know, you're kind of lost. But for me, I know the key points to get to my goal, so whatever happens along the way, I won't be mentally shaken. So like, yeah, strategy is tied to your understanding of your strategy spread, and when something doesn't happen in a branch, you can always just be like, cool, I'll do this because I've already decided how I'm going to fight. So that we can go. Having strategies leads to consistency, and it widens your play style too. What I described is not the only correct way to play, but people come up with their own strategies. But if your strategy isn't better than your opponent's, you will never win. Alright? Strategy limitations right here. Doesn't matter how good your reflexes are, you can't make it up with anything else because fighting games are strategy games first and foremost. And it's played out through action and the precise awareness and execution of things, largely due to timing. And timing is directly related to your opponent's mental state. So really, strategy all the way down. Cool. Thank you, Daigo. Let me just see if Twitch is acting up. Cool. Oop. Well, that was not what I wanted to do. Okay, here we go. Number 57. Nemo's like, if you reveal your winning patterns, you're going to be less likely to win. And Daigo's like, yes. But a good thing about strategies is they are still effective even when they're revealed. That's one difference between strategies and setups. Fighting games are action games, but at the same time, we'll just start right there. So we can say gimmicks. Setups/gimmicks. A lot of people have wackadoodle things and random things they like to pull off in games, and sometimes it works, but what Daigo says is strategies help keep your mentality sharp, and ultimately what leads you to developing strong win rates. And gimmicks are gimmicks. Where's my last one? Do you want 57? Cool. Cool. So that's one thing about gimmicks, but he also says like sharing your strategies, they still work. And what he's really talking about is you can tell people, like I shared all my strategies with you guys about my Footsies play, and we even had a stream where we talked about all these different stats and techniques before with the other Footsies players. And one of them really knew about a lot of these nuances, and the other like didn't as much. But just because I said it online, just because I made a video, doesn't mean that all this information is put into their head. And even if they study this chart and put this information to their head, it doesn't mean that the experience needed to connect it to, like when they're thinking about their own experiences and connecting it and trying to make sense of it, it doesn't mean that those things are equally weighted. And it doesn't mean that after they put this strategy space in their head that they are going to add to it and make it grow and strengthen it in the same way that I would. So giving away your strategy isn't giving away the key to winning. It isn't eliminating hard work. There's still hard work to do. It actually just invites other people to, in essence, speak the same language you're speaking, so that, like, sometimes this situation with parry, break, and all these counterplay options, like, this won't happen if your opponent isn't good enough or strong enough or knowledgeable enough to get some of the branches to flow in this direction. So sometimes you share strategy to help make certain things happen, and even to press more into your advantage. Like if you can get your opponent to stop doing random things and start doing more of the strategies that you outline, that's probably better for you. But we're going to move on a little bit. Fighting games are action games. And I just said I reveal my strategies, but if you don't reveal your strategies, then fighting games are more like simulation games. To be extreme, I mean, what you see on the screen looks like an action game. but you lose on that simulation strategy part of the game because you're matched. You can't even begin to, I can't read fast enough, can't begin to compete. But this is also a real pleasure of games like this. So he's saying, if your strategy is that much better than your opponents because you didn't share it or because they don't have it, they're going to lose hard. They're going to lose, and it's going to be one-sided, and it's going to look like a TV show or a movie or a script or whatever, and you're just going to play it out every single time. And you're just going to beat up on everyone. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of one-sided, and it may look like it's an action game. You're like, maybe he can throw some punches and kicks and get in there. The answer is no. Strategy is supreme in the story. He also said that this is also kind of the fun part about fighting games. So, you know, honestly, you can't help if people are bad or worse than you, right? You can't make other people do enough work to be at your skill level. So if you find people that are weaker than you, that's life, right? So beating them down is a part of what makes fighting games good as well. Like, we don't want every match to be such a one-sided thing. We don't want every match to be like the person is so clueless they just look really bad. However, we want to see it occasionally, and we want to see it on increasingly higher levels of play, because it's like, I can't believe he made that player look like they suck, that kind of a thing. So yeah. 58.
中間ですか？
Okay, let me just read carefully.
あれとかもや
You once spent about 6 months practicing whiff punishing Ibuki's low punch or medium punch with crouching hard kick, right? 6 months training a whiff punishing situation, a single character in a single matchup for a single fighting game. That's incredible. A lot of people don't realize how long it can take to develop certain skills. And if they don't get it instantly, they're like, and they make all kinds of excuses. But you see here, like, the best player in the world once spent 6 months working on a single counter strat. So let me just move this up here. He's talking about whiff punishing. Cool. Reactive counter strategies. Boom. And he's talking about training. Cool. Best learning practice. You can just put that in the training mode and training. For something like that, at first people tend to be like, what are you talking about? There's no way you can do that. Well, I personally think it's not about ideals, but you actually got pretty consistent using this counter strat. When I thought, what can I do to improve my guile even further? That's what he thought one time. His crouching hard kick was the only thing left that I had not labbed enough. Oh. That move is actually pretty strong, only if it's used properly. Okay. Labbing, yep.
ちゃんと的確に使えれば、まあ、結局一周してあれって蹴ってくる
But when I'm facing opponents who already are aware of my whiff punish, let me just hit F11, not F11. Okay. I don't know how to hide this top bar. Okay, anyway. But when I'm facing opponents who are already aware of my whiff punish and gets ready for it, it just means I'm wasting my effort unnecessarily. So right here he's talking about, like, yeah, you can develop a counter, but then if they know you're going to do it, then even working on something for 6 months and getting a very specific counter down, they could just not bite. They could not put themselves in that situation, and you just kind of wasted your time, right? So this is counter strats that go back and forth, yep. And this is also fringe possibilities, because he's really just doing one particular thing and one particular matchup. It's also talking about expectations, right? So if the opponent's just like, wait a minute, you're doing that thing I heard about. Well, then I don't think so. No thanks, sir.
無駄にそこに労力割かされて弱いんですよ。他の対
And that's when that move. What do you say? Stop that. Quit talking quickly. What happened?
というか、
ね、やっぱ判定よりもやっぱり気
Oh.
持ちいいんですか？そういうプレーって。
The clip starts at a certain time. Hold on. It's not even a clip.
スーパーですか？あれとかも
For something like that, at first people tend to be like, what are you talking about? There's no way you can do that. Okay, blah, blah, blah.
蹴ってくるんだ
When facing opponents who are aware, it makes it unnecessary.
弱いんですよ。
Okay, so that was the end of the quote. And that's when the move becomes weak. Yep. Everything's kind of relative. He's talking about that fighting game, bleeding edge, which we put over here, where you really can't escape. You really can't escape the game. Kind of having enough interplay between the major components and people giving and taking that you're kind of at the mercy sometimes of what your opponent lets you do. Let's talk about punk. Let's talk about punk.
スーパーですか？
Didn't I just click this one? I did click that one. That's 808. Labbing moves, so that's 58. Okay, now 59.
あれは決まってるじゃないですか。
I mean, our brain can only handle a limited amount of information, right?
使えるあれは
At the same time, right?
100あるとしたらその
If I'm trying to whiff punish, then I'm already using a certain amount of my brain power on it, but that's whiff punish is very effective if they aren't aware of it.
バンバン空振ってくれる。ダメージ源
That is when the move shines and becomes a reliable source because it's unexpected. Yeah. So it does take some hard work to pull off,
だけど努力あっても
but it's just one of these tricks, right?
ネタというかあれは決まってるじゃないですか。100あるとしたら
So yeah, he made tricks as in, you know, if the opponent expects it, it breaks. If they don't, it's great. Like, he's really kind of reiterating the same thing we just heard. So we can put that under expectations, double blind core, and whiff punishing too. Like, why not? Cool. Next. 60.
どういうことかっていうと
Punk is full of tricks. What do you mean? What I mean is there are so many things that only Punk is able to pull off, so everyone loses to him when they first face him for the first time. This is another example of when we have a case where somebody came up with some unique stuff and we all lost him at the first time. MK Leo talked about Japanese players coming over with their different characters at high level. He talked about when he fought Meister for the first time in his Game & Watch and he lost. It was really hard. Well, you know, it was really, really hard for him. And now he's talking about Punk and Street Fighter. Now Daigo's talking about Punk and Street Fighter, where the first time people fought him, they're just like, what is happening, right? And it just goes to show that novelty may wear off once people learn it, but when it hits you first, it hits a powerful force. So there are many things he's able to pull off. He's just talking about his skill in general, so we'll keep moving.
だから
Facing for him the first time, I was like, what the heck? No one told me this was even possible. But after you've been exposed to what he's capable of, you start having better performance against him. So we're talking about experience, informing strategies. So we're gonna chuck this down and chalk it up to here.
まず誰も認識
Because he is now not unexpected. He pulls off so many things that no one's ever thought of, and that's what makes him unbeatable at first.
本当はみんなと対戦しない
But I think Punk would win a lot more if he doesn't practice with anyone and hides his true skill. What kind of things is he capable of? The biggest thing is that his reaction, including how many moves he can react to and how consistent he is. So basically, like what Daigo said, he spent 6 months learning how to whiff punish on reaction, a very specific thing. he's saying you could do that with any move, any character, any situation. You can refine what you look for and how you strike back and make you a powerful player. Every one of those new little, what you might call tricks that you add to your game makes you a little bit stronger. And he's saying Punk has a ton of them. He has a ton of them. How many moves he can react to and how consistent he is and how fast his reactions are. And you're like, okay, then he has a bigger strategy spread in that particular case. Where is mix-ups? It's less about mix-ups too, but more about fringe possibilities, precise thingies that he can do. We'll just put that there.
幅であったり正確さだったりってことですよね。反応がいい。
He's pretty good reaction speed. Simply put, yes. Like, yeah, if you don't understand that he's tuning his reactions based on like visual cues and situational cues, you know, it's still reaction. So it's just like, yeah, he's fast. He sees sharply and he punishes hard. And you're like, geez, that's scary. Cool. Reactions, experience, no excuses. Cool. It's not just Punk. Young players outside of Japan like Problem X, which is a dictator player, have good reaction times too. He's talking about reactions. When I asked myself, what can I do about that? And my first thought was, I can make it up with abundant fighting game experience. I don't need to react. I'm old. But then I realized that's exactly how an old player would think. When you see someone great, you try to deal with him with your experience. That way of thinking was exactly that of an old player. I realized that's not the solution. I realized the solution was to become Punk myself. That's why I started the practice. I realized how lame it was to try to make up for my lost reaction time with my experience, right? That's just making excuses. That was about a year ago. I changed the way I thought. I realized I had to acquire fast reactions myself. So like, yeah, changing his attitude, his approach, we can just say his mindset. That's a little bit there. And the change in his game followed the change in mindset. And another aspect, you can't just make everything up with experience, right? There are skills. And ultimately somebody has to win and lose in a match, but it doesn't mean that you ignoring learning a certain skill didn't hold you back in some way, right? Fighting games are complicated, made up of thousands of micro interactions, and or fighting game matches are made of thousands of micro interactions, and even if you come out the victor every time doesn't mean there's not something for you to improve, and it doesn't mean you ignoring things was a good idea. So Daigo in this case stopped being an old man and said, how do I improve my reactions? Instead of just like, I'll use a mix-up that I've used for 15 years he probably doesn't know about. Like, no, get in there, get into the lab, try to make it happen. I don't know if I have anything on here on how the skills don't overlap. I don't think I need to. So I can put this under adaptation though. So adaptation level 1 is like within the same skill, the same branch. Adaptation level 2 is shifting whole like strategies or whatever, switching to a different thing to try to accomplish the same goal because it stresses your skills differently. So what he's talking about here is like, he said the wrong thing to do was just to not adapt. Well, he's saying there's no amount of adapting and shifting my strategy around is going to make up the difference for me not having these core reaction skills. So it's really not about adaptation itself, it's about realizing that adaptation can only do so much. And 1 second, peeps. Cool. And that's essentially what this quote's all about. We're gonna move on. Quote number 62 is pictures. I think you need to know frame data first. Do you understand what I mean by frame? Do you? So this is copy image. Quote 62. Nuances right here. The importance of learning frame data. And then he also says, copy image. Do you memorize all these numbers, somebody asks? It's actually pretty simple. So this kind of supports this idea I was talking about before, about frame data. Where is it? Frame data is used to make your mental model more accurate and easier to calculate. So a lot of people sometimes see a bunch of numbers and they're like, oh man, this is so hard. And Daigo's like, it's actually really easy. The numbers are there to help make comparing things easy. That's why numbers are great. That's like the only thing they're good for. Yeah, so I'm just going to put that under precise knowledge. He's talking about frame data as a must. You can't ignore frame data. And we'll move on. Now we're going to jump over to another game series. Daigo's quotes are done. We're going to look at Sonic Fox. Okay, so Sonic Fox. Volume, please. Thank you. So Sonic Fox has this video called Sonic Fox's Explanation on Footsies. It's an hour and 12, 17 minutes long or something like that. And he's just demonstrating and explaining and demonstrating and explaining. And one thing to note here is how excited Sonic Fox sounds. I mean, learning is the name of the game. Learning is the thing that powers your strategy. And strategies are the things that you use to actually win in fighting games. And I created the Cptm learning system to try to help illustrate to people how learning works as a process. And the beginning of this process starts with curiosity. And notice it's like a triangle. You need a ton of curiosity to motivate yourself to have more and more and more and more different kinds of experiences that you perceive. And then from those experiences, you'll have some thoughts and observations about what happened, obviously less and less, right? And then with those thoughts, you need to reflect on them, process them, and turn them into general ideas, rules, methods, strategies, something, right? But the order is obviously like, you're going to need a ton of curiosity and energy and motivation to start this whole process, because every step is refined and you get less and less out of it as you go along. So it's no wonder when you hear people talk about their motivation levels. MKLel, this quote here we already put here, he's like, I love this game, I love practicing, I love playing. And you hear Sonic Fox and they're like just super excited to explain the smallest little aspect about fighting games. It tells you something, right? You can't just become great without wanting to. You can't want to without being excited and having fun. I mean, maybe you can. They make animes all the time about the person whose father pushed him to be the best and he hates ping pong. But, yeah, that's another topic for another day.
He can't do something like this. And now look at the range. Now he actually can't hit me. Like, I can keep hitting him, and he cannot hit me. It's mad interesting. That concept, even though this is not really footsies, that concept I just did there is called abare. And that means, abare means two different things. One, it means attacking while you're in negative. This is one of the biggest concepts that you need to actually understand in general about NRS and 3D fighting games. Abare is so important because you need to show your opponent that you are willing to stand your ground despite being negative. If you can standing one him, I might be cheeky and do something like this. And now look at the range. Now he actually can't hit me. Like, I can keep hitting him and he cannot hit me. It's mad interesting. That concept, even though this is not really Footsies, that concept I just did there is called abare. And that means, abare means two different things. One, it means attacking while you're in negative. This is one of the biggest concepts that you need to actually understand in general about NRS and 3D fighting games. Abare is so important because you need to show your opponent that you are willing to stand your ground despite being negative.
Cool.
If I could standing one him, I might be cheeky and do something like this.
Cool. So, Sonic Fox is articulating a lot of nuances of frame data, positioning, footsies, reads, reactions, whiff punishing, blah, blah, blah. But in this particular case, they explain that there's a certain mentality, it's a certain strategy you can use knowing the frame data and knowing how the frame data typically says you are at risk here, but you still press your advantage and go for a reversal of sorts. And normally when people are negative frame advantage, that means they're slower than their opponent and it's really dangerous for them to do stuff. But here it's like abare means, you know what, I know I'm negative, I know I'm a little bit behind in speed, but I'm going to try this thing to do this anyway and maybe steal my turn back. But all of that is because of a more and more precise knowledge of the frame data and the interactions. And if you don't properly take that data and evaluate the risk reward situations, you're probably not going to be good at some of these subtle reversal opportunities. 65, let's try this.
Somebody like this knows the range of my best button, but they also have the appropriate amount of counters to do it. And every button is different. You need to lab, like, what is the best way to counterpoke something, right? Somebody like this knows the range of my best button, but they also have the appropriate amount of counters to do it. And every button is different. You need to lab, like, what is the best way to counterpoke something, right? Somebody like this knows the range of my best button, but they also have the appropriate amount of counters to do it. And every button is different. You need to lab, like, what is the best way to counterpoke something, right?
Cool. So obviously, knowing the different possibilities at a given range, what's going to happen and what counters what, definitely what we're talking about there. But specifically, you got to lab stuff. I don't know how you're going to learn specifics without being able to zoom in and look at specifics. And for people who are like, I just play by feel all the time, like, there is a limit to that. You know there's a limit to that. Every time you make an excuse for yourself of like, I like to do it more this way. Sure, everybody's got a preference, but it doesn't mean you should completely ignore an entire aspect of your learning, right? In general, there's a concept that I'm rolling with nowadays about integration and about holistic learning. And so much when we have the choice in our little scrubby amateur selves to do something, we like pick and choose based off the lamest reasons, right? Like, oh, I don't feel like doing that. That doesn't sound like fun, so I'm not going to do it. Like, you should flip the script and say, let me do every single thing I possibly can and see how I feel about it. So instead of trying to pick something, be like, labbing's not for me, I don't like going in training mode, how about do it anyway? You don't have to do as much as everybody else. You don't even have to do that much at all. Like 5 minutes, a couple of minutes here and there, but then to neglect it entirely just seems like an incredibly ignorant thing to do, reflecting back on my life. I just made the stupidest decisions sometimes, and I think back, I'm like, why? And it's because I didn't have a coach, I didn't have a lot of structure, I didn't know what I was doing, all those reasons, right? So if you ever find yourself thinking like, reading instructions for a recipe or whatever, and they're like, knead the dough for 5 minutes, and you just go like, I want to knead it for like 1 minute. You're like, why? Just do what the instructions say, right? Do it. Like, try to not only meet people's expectations, but exceed them and see how your life changes. But yeah, when Sonic Fox says you gotta lab stuff out, every button is different. Yes, every move in a video game, every move in these fighting games is different. All their data, all these tiny little nuances, all these tiny little properties and startup values and active values and everything's different. You got to know the differences because the differences make a difference. Especially in a general sense, if the gameplay is really sloppy and amateur and low level, then the differences are completely ignored. But part of fighting games and playing them well and exploring their depth is dun 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 increasingly situational nuance and precise optimizations. You get precise when the difference between a number 2 or number 3 for this move means winning or losing. That's precise. You get nuanced when you're like, did you know that this one checkbox in this property of this column all the way on this hit, this individual frame of this move does this? Check, and that's the difference between winning and losing. Then you know you're playing on a really deep level, so on and so forth, right? Okay, next quote. Here's a random screenshot, so I'll just be like, I'll copy it. But Sonic Fox was like, here's a classic scenario that I have labbed enough to know that the same scenario exists as Catwoman when you're playing against Catwoman. So again, talking about how much he's labbed or how much they've labbed something right here, right there. Cool. Here is an interview, or not an interview, but a video by completely non-Sonic Foxy people talking about why Sonic Fox is so good.
I think Sonic probably, approaches the game in a different way than most people would approach the game in terms of, what is important for them to lab, what is important for that, like what situations that they'll find themselves in a lot, and I think it kind of takes a majority of the community a bit longer to kind of understand that, whereas Sonic kind of just understands it very, very early on. So it's a bit of a catch-up game, at least in the first couple months. I think for sure, yeah.
So Sonic, I feel like Sonic will definitely excels like way faster and quicker in a lot of different fighting games than the majority of people that you'll see out here, which is one of the reasons why they already won that Guilty Gear Strive tournament that Leffen hosted. Sonic came first place in that. I know when Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite came out, Sonic was just fucking people up in that essentially. Even with whatever new game that comes out, they always have this different way of looking at things that's just really, really smart. And I think Sonic also spends a lot of time in the lab, honestly. Like, I don't know how much they talk about it or not, but I feel like they must spend a lot of time, like, labbing things, and then just having all these ideas, and just testing it, breaking it down, and then trying to implement it in games as fast and quick as possible. And Sonic's also one of those type of people that loves picking up so many different characters and placing well with so many characters. Like, back in Injustice 1, I don't know how many major...
Cool. So I'm going to skip ahead to 457.
We are really good at other games as well. Like, like in the past we played Dead by Daylight. Good at that game. I saw Sonic's pretty good at Knockout City as well. So it's like an inherent talent, I think, combined with just a lot of practice and just a lot of love, passion for the games and stuff like that. And I think that's what has to do with it.
Yeah, a lot of...
So, you heard it yourself. Labbing is like, if you had a huge book of everything you ever wanted to know, let's say of the past, not the future, so you can do some, stupid lottery scheme and get rich. Everything you want to know about things that happened to your past. And it's huge, thick of a book. That one time you were like sick? Like, were you close to dying? You're like, I don't know. Go look it up in the book. Like, was it your fault that you got sick? Was it that candy you ate off the ground and when your mom wasn't looking? I don't know. Look it up in the book. Like, imagine you had a book like that and it was just sitting in front of you. You can imagine how curious you would be to flip through it and piece together and finally understand certain things that happened to your life. How fortunate you were, how unfortunate you were, how lucky, all the stuff, right? Like, ooh, would she have gone out with me or whatever? What was she really thinking? You flip. Like, who wouldn't be flipping through that book? And that's kind of what it's like having a game in front of you and being able to lab it. Because guess what? I've anticipated many games in my life. Just sitting there at my computer watching the same trailer over and over and over when I was a kid, and just anticipating Banjo-Kazooie, Smash 64, Ocarina of Time, like so many games, just losing my mind. Game Boy Camera, Pokemon Red, just man, losing my mind waiting for those games. And when you have nothing but a single IGN article and a video, you just scrub it and scrub it and scrub it. But if you have the game action in front of you, what are you waiting for? You got every opportunity to dig in, read every single like Pokemon detail, look at every stat, and listen to every Pokemon cry. You've got it, like finally in your hands. And that's what I feel like. If you have the curiosity, there is no way that I'm not labbing something. These interactions are so neat. I'm so curious, and it helps me understand it so much. If you're not labbing, you're not interested in playing the game, because labbing helps you see the game in real time. So many things happen, and if you have a model of it in your head already, your brain's like, yeah, and just flashes of brilliance and clarity. But if you're like, whoa, what was that? Was that a leg that moved? Come on, like nothing stops you. And nothing stops Sonic Fox from getting to these games, playing a ton of characters, playing a ton of games, labbing them like crazy, finding all these situations, and then trying them out. It's really hard to understate how much Sonic Fox's passion and curiosity leads into the whole learning process, which leads into his strategy space formation, and which leads into the kinds of things he's able to leverage, which leads into more and more victories, which leads into a positive feedback loop on the whole process all over again. So I hope you're really hearing it and seeing it for yourself. It's not just things that I'm saying. It's not just things that you hear straight out of Sonic Fox's mouth, but things that other people are observing about Sonic Fox. We're all looking at the same thing. All right, now for another one of my favorite players.
Next one is don't be scared when pressured. So obviously this is like a math game, Math Fighter 5, where you have to understand the frame data and everything. So there are times where you're gonna get pressured. There's gonna be an opponent's turn where you're gonna get pressured, and it's just one of those things where you just the legend says just take the throw, because if you take the throw, they have to make another read on their part. Right, there's no more throw loops in the game. It's all pseudo throw loops. So, looking for those situations really help a lot, right? So a lot of times, I'm gonna take the throw. I don't want to take the frame shot. I don't want to take the shimmy, right? So it's just one of those things where you want to make a calculated guess, because sometimes people are greedy. People are not comfortable at just grabbing you 500 times around, unless you're like me or Punk that abuses that system and kind of like forces you to mentally break down to just. Next one is don't be scared when pressured. So obviously
Justin Wong giving tips and advice on the art of the lame. He's one of the lamest characters out of all fighting game history, and that's an incredible compliment. Fighting game fortitude 2. Okay, so like just imagine the default video game kid player. Hidden buttons, lights and sounds pop out, hopped up on sugar, something like that. Like people tend to want to hit stuff. Mash buttons works in a lot of single player games when people don't know what they're doing. A lot of people have that basic reaction when playing games, and that kind of translates to people want to act when they feel pressured. People want to act, and a lot of times in fighting games and other games that gets them in trouble. But in other games you can just hit, checkpoint, retry, do it again, learn a little bit. But in fighting games you just lose tournaments. So what Justin Wong is saying here is we're going to start recalibrating our reactions and our mentalities and how we feel. And he's trying to teach people, hey, if you're losing, block the entire match. I don't care if you have 55 seconds left. Like, it'll change the way you think. It'll calm you down in certain ways. You can scout more data. You don't have to just throw out a move and be like, I knew I was going to lose. Like, take your time. Think through the problem. And if it's lame, who cares if it's lame? He likes playing lame. And there's another quote in here that I don't even know if I grabbed, but he says, like, I'm an incredibly kind of calm and reactive, like cautious kind of person in real life. So that translates into how he plays these video games. And he found a play style that not only can win, but is comfortable with who he is. That's always like wonderful to hear. But yeah, it's all within the bounds of fair play in fighting games, and we have to respect it, right? So strategy is king. We talked about how if you have a better strategy than your opponent, you will win absolutely. Okay, Leo said it, Daigo said it, whatever. That strategy could be blocking. That strategy could be attacking. That strategy could be something else. Who knows? Doesn't matter what it is. These fighting games are made out of a balanced triangle of interplay. You've got triangle here, triangle there. Everything always fits into some kind of interplay situation. So who cares if a person chooses something that looks like they're not moving or blocking or whatever? It's up to the opponent to do something about it. It's up to the opponent to say, hey, I labbed this. You're going down. Go ahead and keep blocking for me, son, because I want you to. If they can't say that, then their strategy doesn't beat whatever defensive strategy we're talking about, and they lose, right? That's all there is to it. And I love kind of getting mad and hating these defensive players because, one, it's just kind of fun to root and hoop and holler for whatever you want to see out of the game. But two, when the community gets pissed about defensive play, they take action. They lab offensive things to beat defensive things, and the whole cycle works its way around. So you need to respect players like Justin. You need to respect players that run away most of the time. Maybe just a little. You need to respect those players because they are making the game something where you want to root for somebody to come and punch them in the mouth. And the highs and lows of writing that is what also makes watching these fighting games so interesting over the long period of time. But anyway, Justin is talking about not being pressured. Let me see what he says.
Obviously, this is like a math game, Math Fighter 5, where you have to understand the frame data. And
Math Fighter 5, baby! So, understanding the frame data is important. Street Fighter 5 is tuned in a way where the frame data is a little bit easier to understand compared to other Street Fighters.
Everything. So there are times where you're gonna get pressured. There's gonna be an opponent's turn where you're gonna get pressured, and it's just one of those things where you just, the legend says, just take the throw.
Yeah. So sometimes when people are coming at you and they're like, I'm gonna punch you, I'm gonna kick you, I'm gonna whatever, and you're like blocking, and then they threaten to throw you out of your block. Because grab beats block, and sometimes people freak out and do something, but then they counter that thing you do because everyone freaks out. Sometimes they're like, the throw isn't that much damage, take the throw and then see what they do. And they're really thinking through this strategy spread when they say stuff like this. I'm going to put this quote under branching possibilities and counterplay. It's just like, come on, think about it. Like, is the throw really that bad? Risk reward, branching possibilities, counterplay, cool. So then, this is also a quote from Justin Wong. This is also this is 66.2, okay.
You just have to really study, and if you study, the numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. You just have to really study, and if you study, the numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie. You just have to really study. And if you study, the numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie.
What was that, Justin?
You just have to really study.
Study? You mean get in there and go into the lab and learn what the precise things are? Why?
And if you study, the numbers don't lie.
Wait, are you sure that they don't lie?
The numbers don't lie.
Cool. All right, guys. I mean, I can repeat it a bunch of times. Justin can repeat it a bunch of times. I don't know when you're going to actually start believing it. You need something solid to build your strategy off of, and something solid isn't how I feel today. Something solid isn't, well, I saw my friend do this. Something solid is the numbers, the actual data of the actual game. So that's why I put at the center of it all, the center of the entire strategy spread are the moves, and the center of all the moves are the frame data, the actual properties coded within the game, the actual commands you need to do it. That is solid. There is nothing that anyone can do playing Footsies that can break the basic data you see on this chart. No one can do anything to you in a fighting match that changes the commands you need to do these moves. The rules are rules. The numbers don't lie. Play ball, right? So if you want to ground your expectations and your understanding of something, even if you've never played a single opponent, if you took Footsies and you really looked into these things deeply and you labbed it and you're like, what could happen after this and that, you should be able to pretty much create this strategy spread by yourself. Obviously, it's a lot easier. I mean, I created it largely by myself, but not entirely. I just played against a training mode computer CPU a lot and figured things out. So yeah, base your stuff off of the actual game rules. That is a solid way to go about it. Numbers don't lie. You have to study. You have to study. Like, I mean, I don't know if this is offensive or anything, but yeah, a lot of our. I really wish I had more data on how successful some of our fighting game players are in school or other academic settings, because it's interesting to see this guy here telling you you have to study, and other players saying you have to lab, and knowing that to do well in school and academics is pretty much the same thing. Get in there, hit your books, learn what you got to learn, commit it to memory, do the work, right? And I wonder if there's a player out there that's like terrible in school and then just preaching this stuff for fighting games out the ear. So like, there's so many things to look into community wise and culture wise. But I'm gonna put this under because I've heard Justin Wong talk about his childhood growing up going and playing in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in arcades and losing a lot and learning the game and being birthed out of the arcade culture. Cool stuff. He's got a cool story. But in terms of studying, have you talked about strategy? Have you taken notes? You gotta study. I'm just gonna put it over here. We're just gonna put you down here so you're less confusing. I'm gonna put this here and this here. Cool. 67.
So what I do is I go to training mode, I put myself in a specific scenario that players like to use, and I get my eyes used to the situation where I punish it. So if I'm a knot, right, if I see Cammy doing like stand strong, low strong, and then stand fierce, right, and after that we're in the space, so then she'll just do a dive kick, and the dive kick will be spaced out just perfectly where it's gonna be plus, and if it hits, she gets a full combo back to the same scenario. So I look for that situation, and because I'm put in the corner, I just know the dive kick is coming, because other than that, like, she's not gonna jump at me, or she could dash, but I'm just looking for in terms of defensive aspect, and that's where I just do like EX up grab, for example, right? So those are like kind of scenarios that you want to practice. So what I do is I go to training mode, I put myself in a specific scenario that players like to use, and
cool. So one aspect that I think people completely don't understand about how knowledge feeds into reflex skills is that you have to train your eye to react to something. You don't react abstractly to a scenario, you react to patterns of light, you react to wavelengths and patterns of sound, you react to something, and you can channel your brain to be like, I only want to react to the back leg of my opponent, I only want to react to the top left hair flap of my opponent, or whatever. You can train your eye to react to very, very, very specific stimuli, and you have to, because otherwise the game's like fast and fluid and characters are moving and the colors are changing and the sounds are going. You have to tune your brain to be like, this is the only thing that matters. This is the only thing I want to pay attention to. So a lot of people, when I ask the Footsies question here in the survey, my reactions are too slow for consistent whiff punching. Look at the responses. Yes, people used to think that. Green. Yes, people currently think that. That's crazy. Whiff punishing in Footsies is a little mini game. And it's pretty hard because of the way they set up the minigame. It's kind of on the cusp of your reflexes. For better or for worse, I think the minigame doesn't represent how it works in the actual game. If you train yourself in the actual game, there's only certain times that a whiff punish can actually happen. So let's say it's only when you and your opponent are this close. That means if your opponent's right here, your brain shouldn't even be looking for a whip punish unless you walk closer. And if you walk closer, you know precisely when your brain should go like, whip punish? No. And then you can move back out of it and back and forth. So while the mini games like this, yeah, I'm in your face, like that doesn't happen in actual matches. But in real life, it's much less frequent that your brain actually has to pay attention to that precise distance. And right when you get to the distance, your brain goes, do I even have the ability to explain it to you? Let me see. It's not worth bringing up the diagrams, but the way your neurons work is you have all these long nerve cells, and they have these connections that fan out, and they can make hundreds of connections. It's really quite fascinating. However, when your brain has like a certain scenario that it anticipates, the neurons that are encoding that scenario prime. They have a pre-charge, and when they pre-charge, they're almost like half electrocuted, so that if the scenario actually happens, like if you see it with your eyes and your brain's like, that's the scenario, your neurons for that pattern are actually already ready to go, so then they just fire that much more quickly. They've measured this precisely. So when you're talking about reaction times, firing that much more quickly is the difference between having good reaction times and bad. So that means that your reaction times are highly dependent on the information that you put in your head and the patterns that you refine to make sure that those things trigger. So yes, raw reaction is difficult. And from my studies and my experience, almost everyone's reflex skills and how much their reflexes decay when they have to choose between multiple things, they're about the same for everybody, right? That's crazy. Like, well, if all of our reflexes are about the same, then why do I get my butt kicked? It's because they are putting better information into their eyes. It's because they're going into training mode and refining what they look at and refining how their brain even opens up to the possibility of looking at it and then closes to conserve energy. Because everything takes energy. You saw that Daigo quote? If I'm looking at a whiff punish really hard, I'm using mental focus to try to like focus in on that moment, and that takes energy, but it also takes away energy for you to do other things. So nothing comes for free, everything comes at a cost, and what Justin Wong is saying here is,
so what I do is I go to training mode, I put myself in a specific scenario that players like to use, and I get my eyes used to the situation where I punish it. So if I'm a knot, right, if I see Cammy doing like standing strong, low strong, and then stand fierce, right, and after that, like we're in the space, so then she'll just do a dive kick, and then the dive kick will be spaced out just perfectly where it's gonna be plus, and if it hits, she gets a full combo back to the same scenario. So I look for that situation, and because I'm put in the corner, I just know the dive kick is coming, because other than that, like she's not gonna jump at me, or she could dash, but I'm just looking for in terms of defensive aspect, and that's where I just do like EX up grab, for example, right? So those are like kind of scenarios that you want to practice.
Practicing scenarios, right? Not abstract things, not like, cool, I would like to be fast in my reactions. He's practicing character-specific, distance-specific, strategy-specific scenarios, and he looks for that, and he develops tools, counter tools, right? Like, that's how it works. It's how your brain works. There's no getting around it. There's no generic reflex sauce that you sprinkle over everything. We sprinkle sauce? You slather over everything. That's not how it works. And you can hear it from these players just telling you exactly what they do. There's no mystery anymore. Okay, so let's go a little bit back to Smash. That was fun, guys.
Before this starts, I'd like to say that I don't think this matchup's as bad as a lot of people pretend it is. I think a lot of people just complain way too much against Pikachu. Like, don't get me wrong, Pichu's an amazing character and beats tons of relevant characters. But I see so many people act like their matchup against Pikachu is so much worse than it actually is. They would rather just complain than learn these extra nuances that make their life so much better. Before this starts, I'd like to say...
So, people complaining about matchups, and he's saying people would rather complain instead of taking the interplay, taking the strategy space one step further and learning these precise nuances and counter strategies. And even if they're only Pikachu specific, and even if they're only for like certain situations, fatalities, like, they're gonna make your life easier. They may be less common and on the fringe, but they are counter strategies, and you should do it. So thank you, Fatality.
But notice how at this point, I don't have anything else that's true. F-tilt just catches all their aggressive options. Because think about it in principle. If I F-tilt there and I catch Pikachu, I get an extra hit that puts him in a position to where I can threaten 2-frame downers. If he doesn't drift in, that means he's off stage and I can just threaten 2-frame downers anyway. And then the other option is that he burns his double jump, in which case F-tilt is low commitment enough to where I can react to the jump and then either threaten aerials to chase him, to try and scare him into burning an air dodge and potentially killing him, or going for other things. Like, there's a lot of options I have, and F-tilt covers the scariest option while still letting me preserve all my other potential kill options as well in that situation.
You see how he can understand a situation by all the branching possibilities, including the risk reward and the counter strats, what counters what. Yeah, that's why Fatality is good. In a given stance, in a given scenario, he's like, all these different things, and he knows what to do because he's already labbed or practiced this ahead of time or thought about it.
Yep. So that back air looks kind of funny, but I read he was going to up air there. Have you ever noticed, fairly often, I'll throw out a move that looks like it shouldn't hit, but I'm catching someone as they extend their hurt box? It's like the equivalent of like reading someone throwing out a kick and then specifically trying to hit not necessarily where they're standing, but hit the tip of their foot. Like, I do that kind of thing a lot. Just very traditional Street Fighter style whiff punishing. Like that. Because his tail was back there.
Cool. Thanks, Fatality. Saying all the right stuff. This is a funny interview that I remembered from a tournament that happened 5 years ago or so. Quote 71.
I feel like in that second round, you were really giving it to Fallen. Like, you were just taking his stars and being like, no, that's not how this goes today.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the plan. I just ran at him and hit him.
I like it. I like it. You know, you had the strategy. You were like, this is what I'm going to do. And it worked out really well for you. Do you have any other complex strats we should know about for later today?
So this is really, really complicated. So sometimes instead of just running at him and hit him, I'll just wait like a little bit and then I'll hit him.
I like it. I like it. So you guys, fundamentals of the game. If you're looking for the really complex strats, these are it. Best as you can get. I feel.
So that's kind of a funny joke, but it's true. That's why it's also funny. He's like, she asks him, what are some advanced strategies you use? He's like, I like to hit him in the face. Okay, well, give us a more advanced strat. He's like, okay, sometimes I go to hit him in the face, and then I wait a little bit, and then I hit him in the face. But what he's really saying there is that a lot about fighting games plays on this razor's edge of timing and expectations and stuff. And by slightly changing your timing, even by like the slightest 1/6 of a second or so, you can create an opening where there otherwise wouldn't be, just because you are a master of your timings and you can precisely control when and when you don't do things. And he's just talking about that, and it's just really funny how he put it. So, yep, slight variations are a thing. Not just the strategies you use, but the slight variation in your execution can create a different strategy, believe it or not. It's kind of crazy. Let's go with 72 here.
I realized like my last few sets I was trying so hard. And when I try hard, and this is probably like 99% of Melee players, you're trying really hard, so you're more likely to get mad. So literally, I even changed the way I sit when I was playing a tournament. Like, you guys can't really see because the camera, but like I sit like this and I try to lean forward because I'm like, I gotta try hard. And then after I was like, I'm gonna sit like this. I'm like, you know, let me sit back a little bit. Changed everything. I realized like my last few sets I was trying so.
So what I like about this, trying hard oftentimes kind of creates a mental block and barrier to your ability to react properly, emotionally react properly, perceive what's happening, bounce back, switch strategies, play around, whatever. And there's this like loose, playful state that is usually the most effective for being flexible. And when you try hard and you get angry and you tense up, everything just starts working against you. What I love about this quote is Mango even said that he changed his body language. And we know from neurobiology and neuroscience that physical changes of your body can change your mental state. There's bi-directional control over a lot of things, and sometimes your mental state, you're sat up here, you're sat down here, but sometimes if you act like you're happy, it forces you to be happy up there. It's kind of crazy. When people say don't slouch, sit up, come on, let's go, like there's a lot of common knowledge and conventional wisdom that kind of speaks to this fact. So it shouldn't be something that's too new to you. But it's cool that Mango talked about body language and how his mentality was shaping how he played and how changing both of those changed the outcome of the match. So good stuff. And the last one I have here is from...
But for me, I pretty
Armada.
much try to be my own coach, analyze my own matches, figure out why am I losing, you know, certain interactions, what can I do instead, try to find my own habits that I fall into without even thinking about it. So yeah, I pretty much try to be my own coach and be very aware of everything I do. And even if I won neutral interactions, I still always try to understand how a better player might have made me lose the same situation. But for me, I pretty much try to be my own coach, analyze my own matches.
Cool. So yeah, you gotta watch your own matches, you gotta analyze your own matches, you gotta really... There's things about how to improve specifically. Like we talked about what's core to the fighting game, so most of this is about what fighting games are and how they work. There's a little bit down here about how to improve. I've also watched some other videos on how to improve, but for the most part, I have a short list, and maybe I can show you. Do I even have it? Okay. Let's go over here real quick, and let me just move this. Well, we'll let that load up. But we'll listen to Armada again while we wait. That's not how you do it. This is how you do it.
Figure out why am I losing, you know, certain interactions, what can I do instead, try to find my own habits that I fall into.
Cool. So let's take this for example. Learning extraction, video games, Armada. Armada has 2 videos on how to improve in Smash, and one is in this generic how to learn. You need to take concrete experiences, you need to reflect on observe what you did on those experiences. You need to think about what you did and create abstract conceptualizations for them, like what were you thinking, strategies, heuristics, methods, whatever. You have to like process it, and then you have to apply it back into your game and start the whole process over again. A lot of that lines up with the Cptm learning system that I have, where you get motivated, then you have experiences, and you reflect on those experiences, and you process them, and you repeat the whole process. Just explained in a different way. But Armada also has another video in which he recommends these things to improve in Smash. You need consistent practice, you need to play against other players, you need to practice by yourself, solo practice, you need to lab stuff, and you need to manage your time. So very explicitly, he's like, you have to lab. There's no other way around it. You need to review your own sets, videos of your own stuff. You have to watch yourself. You have to watch other people playing the same character, better players probably. You need to understand why you did the things you did. You need to understand why you got hurt and think about all the other branching possibilities that could have happened if you did this or that. He's talking about developing a strategy space, and he's talking about looking at what you do to be the, looking at your own actions to be the nodes of those strategy space explorations, because obviously you do what you do for a reason. So, and you're only trying to make yourself better, so you need to start with what you do. And then he talks a little bit about some financial things you can do, but one is get lessons and reviews from better players, so coaches. So cool. So even Armada, one of the best melee players of all time, we can look at his advice and how it lines up with. He didn't say anything about taking notes, but you need to take notes, because it's not about taking notes and not taking notes and having this philosophical debate. It's like your brain is only so good at remembering stuff. If you don't want to forget anything, potentially, which any one potential thing can be a key fact in the next breakthrough that you have, then you have to take notes. That's just how it is. How can you organize your strategy space too if you don't have a decent way of either writing down parts of it, or whatever? Notes are just an externalization of your internal thoughts. People shouldn't have such an aversion to them. Talk about strategies, you need language to talk about things, but if you're making a video and you're a commentator and all this stuff, obviously you talk about language. Armada's also used to be a real life teacher and a real life coach, so yes, Armada talks about things. He teaches people how to play. Yes, Armada has. Armada recommends labbing directly. Armada recommends watching your own matches directly and watching other players. He talked about prioritization and if Smash is really something you want to be good at, so we can chalk that up to having fun, because fun is what you decide to do with your time, uncoerced and of your own free will. Do you have a plan when you play? Armada talks a little bit about that. Have you ever lost many times in a row? And that's just life, right? So really, a lot of the advice that he's giving and all these other people are giving, all these videos, everything that we've heard from all these quotes are all lining up very, very nicely. Justin Wong has this bubble quote, but so did the first Hungry Box quote right here too. Oop. Yeah, we have 2 bubble quotes. Cool. So yeah, that was a very long look at these quotes. I have more videos I'm combing through. I mean, this is what you should be doing in real life when you encounter just about anything you hear. You need to listen to it, understand where they're coming from, and try to piece it together in this bigger picture that you're carrying around with you, whether that's your own worldview or whether that's your thought and opinions on a particular game or whatever, right? This is kind of what it means to be a discerning and intelligent human being. Things have to fit together, and sometimes not everything's going to fit together, but your process of trying to find out where it fits is super important. You just saw me for the last like 3-4 hours, and it took even longer to assemble these quotes, put all this information together so that all these different voices, they're all speaking the same language, and you can see it for yourself. So it's not just me trying to convince you, it's not just me showing you the process of playing Footsies and playing other players and explaining it. It's everyone trying to get you to realize that there is one way to improve. We're all human. We all work about the same way. So stop making excuses. Stop thinking you're special and thinking that you can somehow do it in some wackadoodle way that just completely defies science and history and cultural wisdom, right? Like, stop. Do the stuff if you're serious, and if you're curious, I suggest doing this stuff as well. So I created this whole series in order to illuminate these things, and I think the next things that we have to do, here's our schedule. Played the game, downloaded the game, took the survey, studied the results, studied this Dynamap, extract lessons. We listened to videos of other fighting game players and organized their comments. Maybe I'll make another video in which you look at the neuroscience of learning and see how it lines up with everything that everyone said. I have a lot of information and done a lot of research this year on neuroscience and learning, so that could be pretty cool. We can take a look at the survey results again if we want, or even check out some of the other surveys that I've taken on other fighting game players and other times in history in my life. But really, it's all lining up, right? I don't know how much more evidence you would like me to go over and convince you of. I'm still going to continue to play Footsies tournaments. There's a little bit of ironing out of all these techniques in the actual metagame that I have to do. But as you can see, I went from 4th place to 2nd place, and maybe I can get 1st place next time, and who knows what's going to happen. But it's a lot of fun. We're drawing to a close on this entire Footsies fighting game fundamentals. I'm super glad we were able to take it this far, because this is the kind of thing that I feel, and this is the kind of information that I know, and I'm glad that I was able to present it to you in such a way where you can explore it for yourself on your own time. This link to this Figma file to my Dynamaps here are going to be public, so you can just go in, peruse at any time, click on these quotes, listen to themselves, look at the videos around the quotes and see what they have to say. And if you have any examples you want me to add to it, certainly use the comment feature. Let me show you. When you're browsing, you could probably hit this little bubble at the top and like zoom in on a spot and be like, click I have a comment, and then paste in a link or something like that and post it, and I will certainly take a look at it. That is the best way to contextually send me information and add to this whole massive information source. So I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to find out the truth for yourself, and if you have any questions whatsoever, you know where to find me. My name is Richard Terrell. I go by Kirby Kid. You can find me at Twitter at Kirby Kid, or you can check out Design Oriented. We are at designoriented.net. All the information about our Discord channel and our YouTube channel is there, so you should be able to find us pretty easily. But until next time, guys, peace.